Hey my friend, welcome back to the stretch game. I hope your week is starting off right. So over the last 5 weeks now, we've been doing this thing called Essays on Effectiveness. And it's a really cool series and it's been really popular. What we're doing is we're looking at icons from our time and we're picking apart why are they icons and why are they so effective. And then we look at that one thing and we say, okay, if this person is so effective and this is the number one reason, then how can I take that knowledge and how can I apply it to my daily life? And so that's what we're figuring out. And we've looked at icons like Donald Trump, we've looked at Michael Jordan, we've looked at Evander Holyfield, Steve Jobs, Bear Grylls, and this week we are looking at Amelia Boone. And if you don't know who Amelia Boone is, I am incredibly proud to be the one to tell you. It's kind of amazing to me because Amelia Boone is a young woman who is really considered the Michael Jordan of endurance obstacle course racing. She's been on the podium 80 some times and has had 30 over her career, 30 first place finishes. She has won the Spartan race multiple times, and she's the only 3-time winner of the world's toughest mudder. Now notice I said 3-time winner, not women's winner, okay? She has beat the women, she has beaten the men, and has won this thing 3 times. And she's a fairly small, petite young woman. And so to give you some context about the world's toughest mudder, the world's toughest mudder is like a tough mudder. Now I don't know if you maybe know somebody who's gone through that, but the world's toughest mudder is a tough mudder obstacle course. This is an obstacle course that's over 90 miles. And we're not talking little obstacles, okay? We're talking about swimming in water that has an electric current. We're talking about scaling walls. We're talking about having to go under barbed wire for 90 miles, okay? This is not a short obstacle race. Now that's more along the lines of a regular tough mudder. The world's toughest mudder is a competition where you do that 90-mile obstacle course as many times as you can in 24 hours, okay? This is the real deal. This is the real deal of pain and suffering and endurance. And so this is the only person to win that 3 times, and it's a young woman. And so I'm going to tell you some stories from her life. We're going to pick apart that number one thing that makes her so effective and then show you, really teach you through tools and strategies how to apply that one thing to your life. Stay tuned. Alright, so this is Essays on Effectiveness, Amelia Boone. And the first story I want to tell you comes from 2003, I believe. This was the first time that Tough Mudder got the idea to do a world's toughest mudder competition. And so they didn't know exactly what it would look like. They had never done anything like this before, but they said they were going to do an obstacle course, and it was who could complete the obstacle course the most within a 24-hour time period. Now, this is in New Jersey in, I believe, the middle of the winter. And so people that had done Tough Mudders before are the people who tried it out. Amelia Boone was one of them. And they think, okay, how are we going to stay warm overnight in the winter going through this water and running through this course? And they said, well, we'll try wetsuits. And people thought there's no way that you'll be able to run in a wetsuit all night, all day and all night. People will die, like people will not make it. But that's what they did. And so they run this course, and there's a little over 1,000 that do this. Pretty much by nightfall, the vast majority of people have just said forget it, and they've completely dropped out of the course. The 24-hour course dropped everyone out except for 12 people. At the very end, 12 people, 10 men and 2 women. Amelia Boone was one of those women. She became the first women's winner of the world's toughest mudder. And she said at times they would get into the water and it had been long enough since they had been on that part of the course that it would be frozen over. And so their legs would break the ice as they would go into the water to swim underneath an obstacle or do something like that. And she said it was just incredibly grueling. She said she was completely delirious at one point, thinking, what am I doing here? But at the same time, she just felt extremely alive. By 2012, Amelia Boone had been running these obstacle course races for a long time, so much so that she ended up causing an injury because of overwork. Now, this ended up being a femoral shaft stress fracture. And if you don't know what the femoral shaft is, it's the bone that runs from your thigh all the way down to your knee. And because of this overwork, she had gotten a stress fracture. Now, the world's toughest mudder competition was coming up again, and she made the decision to go ahead and go through this race with this femoral stress fracture. Now, she ends up winning out of 1,200 people. She is the women's winner. And when she gets to the end of this 24 hours, when she gets to the end of 23 hours with an hour left, she finds out that she's only 9 minutes behind the first place finisher, a man. And so everybody at World's Toughest Mudder and all the other competitors are cheering her on. She goes ahead and finishes that 24th hour, finishing a little less than 9 minutes behind the first place finisher, who was a man, and that's with a stress fracture in the strongest bone in the human body. And then finally in 2014, she runs in the World's Toughest Mudder again, but because of all this endurance racing, 6 weeks earlier, she had to have a complete knee surgery. And so she never got the okay from her doctor to do this, but 6 weeks after a complete knee surgery, she runs the World's Toughest Mudder again, and she wins overall. She beats out all the men, she beats out all the women out of 1,200 people right after knee surgery and wins the entire thing. And what this makes me think of, what all three of these stories really make me think of, in doing this research over this past week, she's talking to one of these interviewers, and they're talking about these massages where you're trying to work out sore muscles. And she says, the interviewer says, man, I hate those kinds of massages. And she says, oh, I love those kinds of massages. She says, I lean into those kinds of massages. And I already thought I knew what the number one thing was that made Amelia Boone effective, but this solidified it for me, okay? The number one thing that makes Amelia Boone effective is that she leans into suffering. You see, most people, whenever they feel pain, whether it's physical or emotional, they tend to either literally or metaphorically run away from that pain. This is something that Amelia Boone does not do. So how do you take that knowledge? And how do you look at her life and how do you apply that to your own life? And I think there's a couple of different ways, because really there's a couple of different broad categories of suffering. The first is physical suffering, okay? That's whenever you put your body through something and you physically suffer. The second type of way that you can have suffering is emotional suffering. And that's when, you think about what someone has done to you, or you think about doing something and maybe you don't feel good enough, or you have fear that you're not going to be able to accomplish something. That's more the emotional suffering. And so how you apply this to your life is really to look at it in those two ways. The first way you can apply it is by leaning into physical pain. Now, you don't take something big you've never done before, like let's say you've never run a 5K, so you decide next week you're going to run a marathon. That's not what we're talking about, because that can destroy you emotionally as well as physically. But we're talking about facilitating physical pain on a daily basis to help you to create that discipline. And a good example for me, and I talk about this in a previous video, it's actually in my morning ritual,
But what I will do whenever I take a shower, at the very end of my shower, I turn the hot water completely off. So I just have cold water hitting me. And I got this idea from someone else, I cannot remember who, but what stuck with me is they said that I tell my body, so the mind tells the body what it's going to do, and it does it. And it sets you up with discipline that whatever I tell my body I'm going to do, I get it done. And it's so true, because I remember when I first began doing this, and this has been probably 6 or so months ago, I remember how painful it was, and I remember how I thought, why am I doing this? And I remember hated cranking that down to where there was no hot water. The truth is now whenever I do it, it's just a part of my routine and it gets done every single time. Now, there are a lot of health benefits to going from that hot shower to a completely cold shower. It can help your immune system. It helps you in a lot of ways. But the number one reason I do it is because it creates that discipline. It creates that ability to physically lean into suffering every day. The next we're talking about is leaning into emotional pain. And one way you can do this is by running through fear. You see, when people are afraid of something or they don't think they can achieve something, they usually hide from it or run away from it. Just tuck it into the back of their mind. And that's the worst thing you can do, because these things that we're afraid of or these things that we think we might not be able to do, those usually end up being the things that stretch us the most. And I think of Paul the Apostle, who said at one point, "In all things I've learned to be content." And if you think about the things that Paul of the Bible went through, these were beatings, these were being thrown in prison, this was torture at times. And Paul said, "In all things I've learned to be content." Now, as a Christian, I try to focus on being content in my relationship with God, and that's what Paul was talking about. But he had that ability, no matter what, to be content. Well, whenever you go through emotional pain and you run, it sets you up to run the next time. And you don't develop that emotional muscle, which actually from a scientific standpoint is the amygdala. It's that part of your brain that's very weak to start off with that we grow so that we can push through, so that we can move forward, so that we can stretch ourselves to become more. So the next time you think, I don't think I can do that, and you choose not to do it, make the decision to just give it a second thought, a second glance, and say, okay, is there a possibility that I can do this? Am I really just sheltering myself? Do I need to lean into suffering rather than leaning away from suffering? So that's really the two ways that you can do that. I hope you found that beneficial, and I hope you take a look at Amelia Boone's example and you start to lean into suffering both physically and emotionally so that you really can achieve the things that you want, because nothing that's worth achieving is going to be achieved without that pushing through, without a little bit of suffering. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great week this week. Whatever you do with this week, do two things with it. Be both purposeful and productive. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time. Did you like this video? Would you like to make it a part of your daily life? If so, go to thestretchgame.com and download the blueprint. There you'll really get the meat of what was discussed today, because I throw a lot of content at you all at once. But more importantly, you will get your 7-day challenge. Now, this is the part that makes you a doer, not just a hearer. It allows you to really apply what you've learned to your life and be able to grow, be able to discover deeper purpose and master higher productivity. Also, if you'd like to know what it means to be and become a Christian, you can click Faith and it will take you through a course where you can learn just that. Take care, my friends.